Hey everybody, welcome back to another all-new X's for Show, your premier media response series, where today we're going to be taking a look at the very end of everybody's favorite disco, Star Trek Disco. I'm Nico Action. You can check me out at NICOACTION, while you can check out the show at X's for Show. That's X is for show.
Hi everyone, I'm Jonah, and you can find me places all over Discovery. Discover me at Peak Jonah. That's Peak.
Oh, try again for me.
I don't know why I'm muted. I'm TK. You can find me at TK Elemental.
That makes me your producer, Kevo. You can find me at Kevo Really. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment so that we know what you want us to cover in the future. But as we said, today we are here to say a very bittersweet goodbye to Star Trek Discovery.
You know, it's something that I put in the write-up for this episode, that it's actually another 7-year Star Trek series, much like TNG, Voyager, or Deep Space Nine. But whereas they had 178, 176, and 172, this had 65, and that's not the same, but it's certainly not without its repercussions. How did you guys feel about the finale of Discovery? Was 65 enough for you, or you feeling the burn?
For me, 65 was enough. The big thing that we got to factor in is old Star Treks were episodic. So while there were 170 odd TNGs, a bunch were the same episode, just done with slightly different things. Stuff happened that you were like, well, this would irrevocably change the course of everybody's life, and that this character should never be the same. And next week, we never will ever mention that incident again.
Yeah.
So the fact that Disco is serialized and everything affects the next episode and previous stuff comes back to haunt everybody.
Except Ash. Ash never comes up again. Don't worry about it.
Except Ash. There also is, often a very serial feel to or a very episodic feel to the serial nature of the show. This season was the best example, where it was like 5 clues, meaning the next 5 episodes we will be doing 1 clue per ep. The situation with the clue is completely isolated to the episode, and while it ties into the larger clue search, the puzzles are just for this episode. The references are just in this episode. We're doing a Trill one. We're doing an environmentalism one. And so it really actually, in some ways, I found it very cute that it figured out how to be old school Star Trek in that way. All that said, I would have been fine with 65 had everybody known that their last season was their last season.
Agreed.
Going into this season happening, I didn't realize that they didn't know, and then I forgot until I was doing prep for like having watched the finale, I forgot, and I was just so confused by why it didn't quite work, and then I remembered, and that wasn't fair to them at all. I would have given them a 4-episode mini even to get us where we need to be, but 65 was fine.
Kevo, how did you feel about the tight wrap job on Disco in an hour and 24-minute episode?
Yeah, and the proportion on that as to how much of it was the epilogue and how much of it was the proper series finale took me by surprise as well. I really agree with a lot of TK's sentiments about how this season landed. I think it was really fun and interesting. It felt, even though there was an arc, like there was a lot more standalone nature to the episodes, and it was a lot less dire and heavy than season 4 particularly had been. But yeah, there is so much about this finale that you kind of have to forgive the rushed epilogue and ending and the way that it feels. I have a reaction to the way that Hugh looks, the way they've composited Dr. Culber in, because he wasn't available for filming this epilogue because he had other stuff. That's why Owo and Detmer weren't in this season almost at all because Woshikun and Detmer had other jobs. They're only co-starring. They're not any kind of highly contracted regular, so they, got other work thinking there was going to be a season 6. It makes me hope for something, even if we aren't immediately given those 4 episodes like TK said. If we could see more from these characters in other shows or a movie or something down the line, that's one of the great things about streaming today, that we can see so many projects like that.
Now, Jonah, this was your first wrap on a Star Trek. You've watched a lot of a little and a little of a lot, and you've seen things from all over Starfleet. But this, I think, was your first time wrapping a Star Trek live, because I don't know that a Star Trek has ended in your lifetime other than this one. That's mostly a joke. But not by much. So tell me, how did you feel saying goodbye to Disco?
Sad, but also longing for what I would hope the finale gets to look like. It is unfortunate that they didn't know, and I now want to like bang pots and pans to be like, listen, if you're gonna contract people, like, can you like at the start of before they even start writing, be like, hey, this is gonna be the last one. Hey, this is gonna be the last one. Instead of it just feels a little icky, blindsiding, because when they don't know that going into it, like the ending feels hastily tacked on, because it probably was, because they realized we can't series end this show the way that we anticipated.
And especially in this day and age where we better understand streaming and future rewatchable markets and wanting people to develop more love for a property after the fact, like, you want to make sure that there is a better ending for these things these days.
And we forget we used to do this all the time. We used to just cancel series. And again, it didn't matter because they were episodic and they weren't going to do anything. So a lot of times we just didn't even care when the last episode we got was just whatever the end of that season was. But then sometimes it was like, it was like TNG, where honestly, All Good Things is another Star Trek episode. It's one that's very referential and very good. But there was no overarching plot except for like this idea that Q is judging them, but that never really turned into anything.
Well, I love you bringing up that episode though, because I had originally pitched the idea of us ranking the series finales, and there's so many and it would take so much more in-depth conversation, but that was one that stuck out in my mind of, it's not a great series finale. They have good beats, but it's not Deep Space Nine. Nico, you don't think you got something?
Well, I mean, I with all the love and respect in the world, I completely disagree that TNG's finale is about as final and definitive as you can get. In fact, it's why I think Generations is terrible, because Star Trek at that point was so busy thinking about how to do as big an idea as they could. It's literally about the unraveling of existence. And it goes back to the ideas of the first episode. It goes back to the ideas of the Borg. It goes back to ideas that are contained in to do is they're seeking to say that the biggest moments in your life can come in the smallest expectations. Like when you don't realize it, you're going to be faced with unraveling of reality. And I think All Good Things is a statement on Star Trek is about exploring, and you do have to have a break point. There has to be a stop just for the sake of stopping. I think All Good Things is about as stoppy as you get. It's
perfect as a statement about what we did here. But like the
idea, perfect.
Yeah. The idea that is introduced, Q will be judging you, in the first episode of the show, which is referenced in the final episode, amounts to essentially nothing. And if that were done today, if it were a show that had been serialized and had a whole through line, there would be a lot more emphasis on what that judgment was and what it meant and what we are concluding from this story plot-wise. And I think it's one of the things that makes this finale kind of even a tougher letdown, is that they actually had a huge piece of lore that could kind of be a final place for them to say, like, okay, this crew that has been through time and space has now acquired the ultimate power because we're kind of the only people who have seen enough to be there. And I, Michael Burnham, am kind of the only person that has done enough to encounter this and maybe use it with some wisdom. And because they expected a 6th season, the idea that she lets it go is sort of fine, because who knows what they would have done in the 6th season. Actually, they've been telling us, and we'll get to that in a second. But
let's jump into the actual season finale then, because
I am in the season finale. I'm talking about the season finale.
Okay.
So she lets the ultimate power go, and then the episode is just kind of like, well, that's done.
So, let's jump into the not just the reacting to the season finale, but let's actually talk about what happened. Where one of the big things is that they've been trying to connect with the idea of the progenitors, this ongoing idea that there had to be something that came first. And one of the things that I think this season was seeking to do with so much storytelling is give us a point at the end of time that references the beginning of time. There's an inevitability to the cyclical nature of discovery. It started way at the beginning and goes way to the end. But then how do you bring the end back to the beginning? Well, we even find out that the beginning and the end are linked through a portal, a doorway, more than they are actually in simultane. But one of the things that I think this season kind of unfortunately did biff was that we were given 2 characters that I just don't care about, and they were kind of worthless to the narrative. Maul and Locke, to represent the humanity of love in this final season, did nothing for me but remind me why I stopped wearing so much eyeliner.
She got those early aughts raccoon eyes. Thank you, Avril Lavigne.
Yeah.
She loves a chop. I kind of have to agree, because Maul and Locke, while their goal is eventually clearly defined, they're trying to seek this power to end this blood oath against them so that they can live happily ever after. It doesn't quite fully fit the narrative. Honestly, the story could probably go without this and have it just be the Breen by themselves. That probably would suit a little bit better, because they make Maul and Locke out to be this level of threat comparative to Starfleet that doesn't seem to really make sense in my eyes. They're treated as like this, and the way that they act, maybe they're a little bit more skilled than perceptions led on, but it just feels weird. It feels weird how long they were able to evade Starfleet for so long. It feels weird how easy they were able to kind of go toe to toe with them. It just, either Starfleet's not as great as it's trying to portray it is, which is a theme. That's not really the theme of the season. Or they're better, which again, I don't know if everything about it quite fits. So we kind of get these characters that drag a lot of the story away. It also has a connection with a book, which they touched on once and then talked about it again at the end. It felt lost. I do think looking for the progenitors tech is an interesting story. What does that mean? What does that look like? These different tests, going to the different worlds with each scientist specializing in a certain thing, and the test revolving around whatever the scientist was their focal study. That all makes sense, especially we have a captain who is a xenoanthropologist. And that comes up a lot in Michael's travels. And I love when they put situations for her to use that. I just don't know if the emotional tugging Maul and Locke do is worth it and makes sense for this story.
What do you guys think?
One of the things that I had said early on that I felt about Maul and Locke is the fact that they're fully fledged adults. And I think, especially with the way that Adira and Gray kind of blurred the line of, like, they were supposed to be teenagers, but behaved very grown up in a way that made you forget a lot. Like, these characters definitely were played by people in their 30s. And so a lot of their very childish behavior I found very difficult to enjoy. If they'd been 19 and that was why they were so wild and Bonnie and Clyding, like, then it would have really clicked a lot better for me, I think. But she does act like such a baby for someone who is a fully grown woman, and so it makes it harder for me. Like, I would appreciate a little bit more emotional maturity and just like common sense sometimes from my antagonists, and not even necessarily villains, because there's been a lot of characters that are antagonists and not villains. There's the security chief from Earth, who was the representative with the 10C. There was Osira, who was an amazing antagonist, and wasn't just like, the one time that we really loved Maul was when she took out Locke's uncle and stepped up and took leadership of the Breen in the name of Locke, and in ways that it felt like we're being portrayed as hoping to lead for the benefit of the Breen. And then it kind of immediately fell back from there, and she sort of just reverted back to the same character and will just do, it's especially frustrating when this is supposed to be a show about cooperation. So you have to watch these characters who refuse to cooperate a lot.
But, like, that could work if they did something with it. I completely agree with everything that you're saying in terms of, like, they are just so childish. There was so much to be done with, like, Breen politics, and if Maul had been some kind of like genetically engineered super person, that they get to this point with the character where she starts calling herself the wife of Locke, and it kind of seems like she's about to take over the whole Breen Empire really fast. And it sort of, I kind of could like and see that direction if the character felt like, these two were people that somehow came together because they were both created to be super weapons in and of themselves, and that's why they're so threatening to the Federation, and they're kind of treated like that, but we, the audience, actually know they're not that. They're just kind of two scumbags on the run, they're not threatening at all. And then on top of all that, while they're very successful at executing plans, and she sees the opportunity to turn on the uncle and she does it, you're right, she's just completely emotional. And so you have this amazing moment where Burnham Burnhams and finally wins her over, and she's like, you just got to trust me. And this actor does such a good job, Eve Hazelton, I think it is, does such a good job of switching up and being like, okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to trust you. And they're about to work together and things don't go quite right. And she just she knocks Burnham out and is right back to like, gotta go fucking wake up Locke. It's so repetitive because we've seen this a billion times where Burnham has Locke in sickbay and she's like, we're going to take care of your guy. We're going to make sure he's okay and we'd love to work with you. And she goes, okay, we got to get you out of this really nice medical facility where they're saving your life, which ultimately kills him. No lesson is learned. She's still doing the same stuff. And we're balancing that with seeing her constantly succeed and one up for reasons that are not logical.
Luck. Usually.
Yeah, luck. Nothing compelling. Nothing certainly as a viewer where we're like, dang, this antagonist is like somebody I can really root for because she's so smart, but I'm frustrated by because she is pitted against our people. It's underwhelming. It doesn't work, and they are there until the final minutes of the finale of the story, where ultimately we don't even get satisfaction from the conclusion of their love story because the progenitor is just like, yeah, we don't bring people back to life. Sorry, you got to go back into reality and tell this girl that like he's just dead. And end of story. And then we get this little moment, which I don't really know what to make of.
And it's so weird because this is not the first love story that saw somebody come back from the dead for an inexplicable reason. So, like, one of the things that you really need to be careful about is every time you tell us that something is the greatest this or the biggest that or the only force that can this or that, you wind up endangering the quality of that consistency. So, like, I'm glad that there was this very clear no one can have this, let's get rid of it, because I would have been very bored with the Starfleet of the future having this power, because if they had it, it would have been one season before somebody came for it, corrupted it, destroyed it. Every third season, there is a bunch of slugs controlling Starfleet. So, like, guys, the other... Oh, by all means.
No, I was just going to say, I love you pointing to other people coming back from the dead, because I feel like something they could have better connected to the story of everything is the fact that Hugh was going through this and is always experiencing this crisis of I died and I came back, and Locke doesn't get that. And that's just life, that not everyone gets the same breaks.
Which is where I find one of the things about this season the most compelling was the idea that the quiet moments were very loud. The moments between Hugh and Tilly, or the moments between new members of the bridge crew meeting old members of the bridge crew, those special select moments where, and I'm so embarrassed that I can't think of Tig Notaro's character's name off the top of my head. Reno, thank you. Provides the most incredible perspective on, like, you got stuck in a time loop, right? Is that what's happening here? You know, this idea that the intimacy grew despite being what seemed like smaller and fewer and further between. It was really special. What did you guys think about the interpersonal relationships between the characters this season?
I think it is one of the many things, and I'm glad that you asked that as I had this screen cap up, because I think it's one of the many things that I feel like maybe they believed they had more time to carry things across the finish line. Like the scene with Burnham and Book at the very end. I wonder if this was originally played differently, and this might be minorly reshot so they do get together so the epilogue can make sense. I wonder if they still wouldn't have been together in season 6, and it would have been a longer journey for them to get back together. But then I also, and I complain about this relationship a lot, because I don't get why it feels so stifled, of this thing where we're told they have this parent-child relationship, but like, I don't know, I always just expect a little bit more, and maybe it's me, but like, I kind of hoped they would call Paul Dad in this moment.
Well, yeah, the problem is Stamets has all of the emotional intellectuality of a Lincoln Log. So, like, it's just never going to do what you want.
Like
how did you get so wise? Like, that was just a normal thing that Adira said, and if anything, the way that they said it so constipated, like they were afraid you were going to beat them any second for trying to say something positive, when actually your face kind of looked chill. You just looked like you were breathing and processing a very big thing after a 6-month journey of chasing down that technology. Like, I actually appreciated his reaction of, you want to do what to science?
Well, I'm so sorry. And when he was like, early at one point in the scene, he said, when did you get so wise? I just want to know why he delivered that like Steve Perry at the end of the Oh Sherry video. You know, baby, I kind of like you. It was the weirdest delivery. And the fact that we went this entire time and no one has said 23:34 stardate PM at any point, when every episode of Classic Trek opens with the date and time, and Rent, the thing that he is most famous for, opens with him giving the date and time. I don't know. I just felt like this was not the best landing for these characters.
I think some characters fared better with interpersonal connections than others. I do think this one is a little more weird, because you also have to remember, like, Stamets' entire character arc this season is they were getting rid of the spore drive research. Oh, goodness gracious. And he kind of has to think about, what am I doing next? And he kind of thought this would be an easier job, a last minute thing before he goes to study at the Vulcan Academy, I believe. And it's a much larger thing. I do, and the scene I think just ends weird. I think everything about the scene makes sense of him, prolificating. And
I also want to say, I think there are things that are naturally cut off by the fact that it was the series finale. Like, for example, something that I shouted during this scene where they used the spore drive to transport the Breen away was, okay, now there's going to be interest in the spore drive project again at Starfleet. That's great. But now that's a story that they can't do because it ended. So I don't know, and maybe it would have gone nowhere, but it would have been something that would have brought this back to the forefront. Like, I wonder if there would have been, like, the epilogue, not to jump ahead, but it's something that would have been brought Zora back to the forefront. We would have seen Owo and Detmer back to the forefront, but, like, because it was so sudden and because they thought they had more time, these things were unfortunately lost.
But I do think other people thrived. Like, I want to call him Kramer. That's not his name. The new number one.
Oh, Kelleran or something.
And
He
Tilly.
is a Kelleran. It's Rayner, not Kramer.
Rayner.
You know, no. Stammer. Rayner. I really enjoyed his and Tilly's relationship. He's also someone, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I've seen, even though we really only see him as a captain role for one episode and he becomes the number one, to my knowledge, he's like the first non-human captain that I've met.
He is one of the main, I would say, non-human presenting characters of the last few years to sit in one of those two positions. It's almost always a Vulcan if it's not a human, and not to be like, well, Vulcans are kind of easy to give it to, but it is sort of like saying let the AI do the job, because it is somebody who functions predominantly on a series of if-then logic statements. So like, this is, as Jonah's pointing out, kind of a rare opportunity to see a let's go with traditionally human species. Looking at you, Final Fantasy fans, a non-traditionally human species in a pretty cool chair. TK, how you feeling about the interactions on the cast on this final season?
You're correct. This was really one of the best parts of the whole thing. And you can kind of go through this laundry list of relationships that get highlighted throughout. Tilly and Rayner actually was a really fantastic one. Tarina and Saru, we got a little romance in them, because honestly, like, I think we all knew we were getting Book and Burnham at some point, or if the show had not ended, we were going to do more relationship drama. But to see two people have just a very quiet, healthy, beautiful romance is sometimes, I think, like, everybody forgets can be really fun on TV. They don't always need to be dramatic. It can, we can enjoy just watching two people love and respect each other. So that was an amazing relationship. Hugh and Tilly was another one where they just did have a few moments that I was like, this is really beautiful. And so, for me, it was all about the relationships and this idea that everybody kind of needs a mentor at some point, or even just in some moments, they need somebody to give advice. And, Jet Reno is that person a lot of times, for any particular crew member who's freaking out. Jet is just never freaking out. And so in moments where everybody's rushed around, she's really the person that you go to get a calm answer. So for me, even though I understand that a lot of that wasn't written into the show thinking of a finale, it did help soften the blow of the abrupt finale, because you got to see so many people. Oh, the other one was God, I was like talking to try and remember it. Nan and Saru on the ship together in that last episode. Just, they two work colleagues. She's such a phenomenal character and has had one of the best arcs in the series. But they used her less and less, and her arc really was focused around Michael seeing her as an asset. We didn't get a ton of her interacting with the rest of the crew significantly. And so to see these two who are removed from Discovery come back to be allies to it and to be waiting in the wings to save it, and just to sort of have some conversations together. This felt like just a really beautiful moment of like, Discovery is a family. And if you are on the crew of Discovery and you find yourself next to another member of the crew of Discovery, you are talking to a brother or a sister. And so again, that was one of the things that just really, I was able to appreciate that even in the times where I was like, okay, here's all the stuff I don't appreciate about where this left us as a finale.
Mhm.
Speaking of things that got left places during this finale, that epilogue. So here's the thing. Sometimes writers are like, don't worry, I promise I'm going to make that thing make sense. And I'm like, okay, do it. But please don't make it the only thing you care about. I have a lot of feelings about the way the epilogue lands. When I think about seeing a character happy, I think about wanting to see them happy, not be shown for 1 second that they're happy. If seeing Book and Burnham, whose name is very clearly an attack on libraries, by the way, if seeing Burnham and Book be married and happy and have a kid was really just 3 seconds, then I would have just read a Wikipedia article. I would want to see this. That's what's magical. So then it's the exact same thing of where we see Burnham go back to the ship that she says has a crew, and then we don't see the crew, and we only flash back to the crew that we love, and then they go away, and then the idea that Zora is just going to sit in space like it's some sort of weird, scary junkyard. I don't know. This is not my favorite epilogue ever.
Well, I know TK said that he had read some stuff. I've seen some things. I know that I saw something about how a lot of the things we saw toward the end of this episode were things that would have tied into the arc of next season. I don't know how much of that is from the epilogue or how much of it was from specifically the Kovich reveal, or kind of, I really wonder how much of those are connected, because I felt like so much of the way that Burnham was speaking to Zora was so thinly veiled. She said it was a red directive. It makes me wonder if there is some sort of odd time loop. I wonder whether or not Kraft would have been involved in season 6. I don't know if that was a plan or if they were like, we're ending, so we're going to throw this tease out there to hopefully get people interested. The only thing that I would say for the benefit that I really enjoyed about this tag and seeing Burnham and seeing her thrive, we can only get so many people back to film anything for a tag. So you really want to focus on the person who was the lead of this show. I loved seeing this incredibly happy and successful Black family. I love seeing a Black Admiral. I love seeing her son being a captain. And I feel like a lot of that was kind of laying a claim to the potential of anything anyone could do to Michael Burnham's future. It was saying she will survive. She will become an admiral. She has a family. Her son is amazing and successful. But it keeps us from touching on anyone else too much. I think Saru might have been mentioned, but it's mostly like we could imagine who survived, who's out there, who else is thriving, while still giving us something to give us a sense of closure. But it's tough. It is tough. And especially as a viewer who wants more and is very afraid that this is the last thing we will ever get about this crew or these characters, I see where it isn't satisfying.
TK, how did you feel about the epilogue?
I am trying to be as diplomatic as possible. Zora's my favorite character on the show. I think Calypso is a really cool, beautiful little moment in time that I would have been perfectly happy if it was just apocryphal.
Or just never answered. It didn't need to be.
The idea, so as Kevo mentioned, they did say that their plans for season 6 were really to tie this in and get this all. None of these people wrote this. It was a Michael Chabon thing, wrote Calypso. It is a completely separate thing that had nothing to do with anything. The idea that it was really important to tie it in is exceedingly weird to me. And it's just...
I agree.
It's a bummer because it's really, to do it voluntarily to Zora is incredibly cruel. Only because, like, if she had just been exactly the same during Calypso, and been like, yeah, I've been chilling. Time doesn't mean anything to me. I might feel differently, but she is basically going
Sad.
insane. She's incredibly lonely and sad. And on top of that, she has developed a complex about the fact that she is not a person. That she doesn't have a physical body, that she can't dance. And so the idea that, I mean, Michael might not know it, but she's literally, just because she's been told to, dumping a crew member in space and walking away. That doesn't feel very Michael. And if you want to say, like, she has no idea what's actually happening, she doesn't know it's going to be 1,000 years. That's just, it's still kind of cruel and weird.
It's just, it felt like it skirted the line of how much of this was Zora was volunteering, how much of this was she was being forced to do this.
Because she doesn't know. She said they just tell her, we're gonna take you there and you're gonna wait, and that's just your job. She has no idea what's going to happen. I can immediately start thinking of ways that it's okay if Kovich is Daniels. Because Daniels has like 8 different versions of himself. He dies, I think, twice. Once it's just never explained why he lives again. And then another one, Archer goes back, like definitively goes back and saves him so that Daniels can still exist. So, maybe we're doing this just to get to a point where we can go back and undo it, so Zora doesn't wait 1,000 years. But that's me hanging a lot on the idea that anybody cares that we do a huge arc about Zora. And based on the way this season went, I don't feel that that's likely, because Zora was really left out of a lot of the season, which was pretty heartbreaking to me. I don't know. I just, everything about the time jump to me was a bit of a bummer. That Michael was really happy was great, but sort of expected. But the crew moment, it just, I don't know how you don't think, I guess we got to do something else when you realize that you can't age everybody up and put them in the room. I don't know what you do there, but I feel like you have to do something else besides show them all meeting up as young people and then say they're all on the ship because that's the plan, but then nobody is on the ship with, is she crazy? Is she senile?
Well, she said, the crew and I will leave you.
Right, exactly. And there's so many memories, but then she's just there alone. Let's fly. Who's flying? Who's flying the ship? I can't speak to any of it. I did love the wedding and the moment with Kovich. I thought, even though I think Daniels is a terrible character on Enterprise, it really did bother me that we skipped entirely over the temporal Cold War once we introduced the burn, and that temporal Starfleet is just gone entirely. Nobody talks about it. We have no idea what's going on. It's not anything. And weirdly, like, Burnham would have some knowledge of Archer's experiences because she's not super far. Her birth is not super far ahead of his time. So like, there was cool stuff here. And even though I think Enterprise is very silly, I think the temporal Cold War was very silly. I actually was like, if it's canon in the Star Trek universe that happened, this might actually be a perfectly good place to shore up some of that really bad UPN production, and maybe turn that into something interesting.
On the subject of Enterprise, then, do you feel that this tag for a somewhat rushed series finale is better or worse, more or less satisfying than the Enterprise? Was this whole series just a thing we watched on the holodeck? Or, like, I felt this was at least a little bit more satisfying than that surprise for a finale would have been, but it's hard for me to say not having watched it live.
The Enterprise thing to me was just sort of cutesy and dumb. Because my feeling being like, it all absolutely happened exactly as we saw it, and that holodeck frame is just sort of to have the moment. But like, you know, their fidelity to experience is so total that it's not like I woke up from a dream. It just, I would not, if I were the producer, I would have said, like, we're just going to cut that and end a different way. But it did feel more like aren't we cute? Like, we live these moments, rather than a thing being like, it actually might have happened completely differently from this, because this was all just a holodeck adventure.
I think it's trope of era more than anything.
Yep.
I think it was just a design flaw of 90s television. And I think
that was Jonathan Frakes directing, right?
The previous episode, he did the penultimate.
Oh,
no,
so
I
mean
meant
for Enterprise.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll check.
You know, whether this was a sort of relic of its own time as well, the way the Enterprise one was, where shows are they're so consumed with their legacy. You know, Jonah Kovich is a character that has been so central to the experience of Discovery for so long. How did it feel as somebody with an understanding of something like Picard's wine or Geordi's visor? How did it feel seeing this character be so steeped in tradition?
Oh, I did not realize that was Picard's wine. I must have bad taste.
Your taste in wine is pedestrian at best, but I really, it's Chateau Picard. So, and then that's of course one of Cisco's baseballs.
Nothing from Janeway, though. Constant disrespect for Janeway.
I can.
What did you want? A lizard skeleton?
I was going to say, if there's an empty one of these, it's where Janeway is missing too. So, Jonah, how did you feel?
I didn't quite know how to feel because I'm not so engrossed with Star Trek knowledge yet that this reveal doesn't mean much to me, because I don't know who the character is, and I also didn't really get the, oh, that's Geordi's, oh, that's Jean-Luc, oh, that's, whatever. I didn't realize all of that, so a lot of that impact was lost on me, especially if Star Trek Discovery is the first Star Trek you pick up and you watch. This is for the fans who kind of know everything, and that's great. We like when you throw those people a bone. Just as someone who isn't that knowledgeable yet, it didn't have much of an impact because it couldn't, because I don't know who this is. I don't know who that is. Sorry to this man. I don't know who that is.
I need to rewatch the episode. Do they say anything about him being a time agent and that, or did they just say Agent Daniels?
He says many lives.
He says many lives. Agent Daniels, USS Enterprise, which is actually wild because he's like he's a fake Enterprise crew member for a minute before his whole thing is revealed.
It's like Gunther saying he's one of the friends. Like, you actually are not a staff on the USS Enterprise. You're being a little liar pants right now.
It's that moment in Wrath of Khan when Khan flat out says to Chekhov, I never forget a face. Chekhov was not on the show yet in Khan's episode, and so somebody would later on write into a novel that's a time where Chekhov was serving as a yeoman and guided Khan on the ship for one scene that we never saw.
We didn't see him. We didn't see that coconut head. We didn't see him.
It's one of those memories that people project into these situations. Oh, well, yeah, well, he was an Enterprise member. That's how we'll make it clear.
Right. He was on Enterprise, which is so funny, too, because Enterprise is the name of like 5 different ships that people know from multiple shows and movies. So when he doesn't say, and I actually even think he does say US, I got to go back, because isn't it the ISS Enterprise?
No, it is USS, and he does say it. And now that you're saying it, I do remember.
Okay. Yeah, there would be, like, if you don't know, you might think that he was on Picard's ship. You could think that he was on Kirk's ship.
And one thing that would have actually changed it would have been a really interesting thing to point to why he was so fascinated with Discovery and Burnham and everything like that. If he'd said the year, if he'd said the date that he served on the USS Enterprise, if he'd said he served on the NX-01, that would have, like, a lot of fans even, like, I feel like Jonah would have even gotten that by now because of Strange New Worlds. and the way that they talked about the NX-01 and Archer. And so I feel like there are things they could have done. Just saying the Enterprise wasn't really enough, because like he even could have pointed to, you think you're so impressive that you serve on the USS Discovery in the 2260s and the 3180s. Well, I served on the NX-01 in 2150. Like, that would have really clued us into a little bit more who the character is without having to go too far into the lore of the Time War or whatever it's called, Temporal Wars. They did it first, so.
And one of the journeys that this show has asked us to take is, it kind of actually ties into Mark's question from a little bit earlier. Who's had the best character progression in Disco from series 1 to the end? I don't know what a series of television is, but for us Americans, it is a season of television. You might notice that we've actually done that to your precious Doctor Who. I'm kidding. All in good fun. Series is a totally fine way to describe things. Totally the same. But if you're asking me who's had the best progression, I don't think it's Michael Burnham, because I think Michael Burnham actually, it's almost like everybody else just kind of fucking caught up. Everybody else just kind of got how great she was. It was just always a matter of time. I think for me,
I'll be like, excuse me?
For me, it's probably Saru, who, just to jump back, one of the moments that I thought really was screwed by the epilogue was that moment where Saru was like, I am a Kelpian. I am a predator. I will find the way to destroy you. It was like so incredible. This poor actor, Doug Jones, is this man who doesn't get enough respect in general and gets edited out of his own films and is incredible. And to see him get that moment of power, to see him get that identity moment where he was able to assert himself so powerfully, and then to see it just be, he hugs Michael in the epilogue. That was a disservice to a number of the characters that I think really fill out the amazing series that is Discovery.
I'm going to make an argument for Sylvia Tilly. Seeing Tilly kind of start as an ensign.
Oh, Starfleet Academy's Tilly?
Well, let's not jump any guns, because
guns.
Hoping and praying, but the only face we have confirmed for Starfleet Academy currently is Holly Hunter.
It's Holly Hunter? And I would like to say by this point...
Could you repeat that?
I said I'd like to say by this point in time, it's jumping the phaser.
Oh, yeah, that's really fair. And also, by this point in time, she's Elastigirl. It really did feel, though, and I want to point to that moment as well, that everything about the moment with Tilly and Rayner and Michael at the wedding, where she's like, I'm going to set up a mentor system at the Starfleet Academy so that cast members from this show can guest star. Like, that's literally why they said it. And whether that wasn't originally in the season 5 finale or was added for this, I feel like it was probably originally in it. I feel like it was probably meant to lead us into what was going to be the next thing. Because if this had gotten picked up for season 6, I think they know that it would have been after Strange New World season 3 and Starfleet Academy season 1. So it would have been, they would have picked up and they could have led things in from Starfleet Academy even. So hopefully we see her. It would be a huge waste, especially because the actor herself has shown so many versatile sides. Even if you don't always love everything about Tilly, you can find a shade of Tilly that would fit, that I think would do well, that people could enjoy.
Also, her hair is amazing, and she should bang Rayner because he deserves to
oh my God,
this powerful, this sexy, and this incredible on every level.
He couldn't handle it.
Oh my God, please.
Doesn't she have a thing for soldiers? Isn't that her shtick from season 1? Anyway, from season 1 to season 5 to season now, Tilly is just kind of perfection. I literally message Kevo maybe weekly when I'm catching up, because I'm almost up with season 4, or I'm about halfway through, and I go, Tilly makes me believe in Starfleet. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I love her so much. Seeing Tilly grow in the way she does, she kind of does the lower decks thing, but kind of just sped up, because she starts as an ensign, she's working the bridge, she's working a science vessel, and she's kind of a prodigy. Not, even though that's a different Star Trek show.
Wait a minute, she's on the lower decks and she's a prodigy? Man, you're knocking it out. She's a real enterprising gal, huh?
She's gonna. Never mind. I was about to make a joke about Deep Space Nine, and that's not appropriate.
Well, I'm hoping that Rayner and her get to that.
Oh yeah.
But Tilly as a character study, Sylvia Tilly is quite fascinating, especially because as they delve more into her own psyche and kind of realizing, oh, I didn't actually want this. I thought I
Great
did.
point.
I loved that.
And I realized I was just kind of trying to spite my mother. And I'm not going to see her again. What am I doing this for? And that journey, I think, is really powerful and important for, honestly, anybody to see that, like, you aren't always necessarily stuck with what you're doing. Are you doing something for the right reasons? Are you doing something because you actually enjoy it and you love it? Or are you trying to prove something to somebody?
TK, for you, who had the greatest vault from one point to another? Was it like somebody just walked from room to room, or was this some holodeck to the planet surface shit?
Mine's been gone for a hot minute, but I think
Ash.
Yeah.
I think her journey will be remembered forever. That is, of course, my precious, my queen, Giorgio. From Terran murderous emperor to surrogate mother figure to Michael Burnham, and then eventually, I think the word is that they're done wrapping. They've wrapped shooting Section 31, so we're about to get that. Michelle Yeoh is obviously just such a queen, but that really, they were at a really different point in writing their show when Giorgio exits. And there are a few characters in like all of writing that I think ever really compel you with this type of story. I think it's so difficult to have somebody who has committed a lot of murder.
A lot of murders.
Unless it is like, I wanted to be a good person and I was just scrapping to survive. But like, she at no point in her whole life wanted to be a good person. That's the whole point of the mirror universe. She had no interest in being a good person. And so to get her to a point of crying at leaving Michael really was a whole thing. The other one that I am always so moved by is Illyria on Angel. Even though it's a really quick storyline, they really managed to convince you that this elder god, who, again, has no concern for the millions of lives that she has taken, this elder god comes to a moment of humanity and of grieving over one single person that she loved. And like I said, just very few stories ever convince me with that particular thing. But this Giorgio was such a special one. And I do really mark the time after that as being a point at which it felt like the show wanted to get a little more into episodic and a little more into less high stakes storylines. And I think they thought they were going to get another one so they could be a little cash. These first 2.5 seasons are not casual. They are very consequential. It is a lot of drama.
And there's so much weird Klingon sex.
You birth
You know
other
what?
shows.
Mother.
Do you know what I would compare it to? That is something that you and I both love in terms of shows that had this sort of weird pacing and thought they had forever, because this show did end up having forever to continually renew and reinvent itself. But One Tree Hill was something that went through so many modes, and I feel like, they wanted like those extra couple of seasons to make the Clay and Quentin seasons feel more legitimate in compared to the long run of the show. They needed
Julie in the book.
What?
Does that make Julie in the book?
No, maybe. But they needed a little bit more time to get away from the era that was Giorgio, who was such an iconic character, but they needed to build an identity of what Discovery was independent of who that character is, I feel.
Yeah.
And, I think that one of the things, and this one's kind of just for Kevo, is that she has fortitude from your Terran universe.
Fortitude.
I think that one of the things that Giorgio gives that, there's nothing that can be said, but like, TK, you're so right that having an outright fucking murderer as a regular character is just so not Star Trek. And even when people are like, no, I can name several. No, you're an idiot, because they're not murderers like her.
And super racist.
Oh, so racist and speciest. And one of the things that she is she's like as morally ambiguous, I guess, as Q, where she's like, some people have to live and some people have to die. But Q has limitless power.
Yeah.
She recognizes she could be one of those people who just has to die. And that's not Q. She offers a moral quandary of, what if you're amoral and also accepting? And
Still
like,
yeah.
It's a fascinating character study, and I'm so glad you brought her up.
I am too.
And speaking of hers that I'm so glad that come up, Kevo, I'm pretending you're a her for the second. What is your big transfo? Who is your biggest growth?
I'm really glad that TK's answer was Giorgio, because it's a great answer, and because the one that I landed on is sort of an anti-answer, and part of it is, we said from the start of the series to the end, and there are so few characters that made it such a long way. And one character that I was thinking about that I think didn't grow from the start of the series to the end, but in a way that I'm okay with, specifically is Stamets. I feel like he started in a place where obviously he was a lot more obnoxious and rude and mean, and then it really feels more like they got first season notes. And we need to pull back on that, and we need to not think that these husbands hate each other, because when you kill one of them, no one is going to care.
The brown one.
What?
The brown one.
Even if you bring it back, it's not going to have this effect that you want. So you have to make these people a little bit more chill. Maybe you give them a child or something. I don't know. Do something with them. But I really feel like Stamets remained moderately consistent from start to finish in a way where they were able to use him in different modes instead of him starting just awful and having to grow to be someone great. He's flawed, and sometimes he's obnoxious, and sometimes he's helpful and over enthusiastic. And I feel like Star Trek also needs characters like that and to help demark the start to finish. I don't necessarily think Deanna Troi went through the same character arc that Jean-Luc Picard went through. I think she went through and learned things from her experience on the Enterprise, but I think that she's a lot more the person she started as at the end than some other characters were. And I think that can be great too. And so I really appreciated after they were able to tone him down, make him a little bit less aggro, I think, to combat. Yeah, and I think that was even to combat any potential criticisms of him being an openly queer character in the lead cast in such a significant role. Make him as masculine aggressive as we can make Anthony Rapp. And instead, he ends in a much better place where he's got that funny rapport with Reno that we all enjoy watching so much. And so I think how this character maintained for the series as being one of the few from start to finish is something that I appreciated.
And I just want to comment, and I'm going to make a silly joke, but, obviously we're all overlooking the greatest growth of the entire season, which is Hugh's chest. Just how unbelievably handsome Wilson Cruz is definitely plays a fact in making his character a major character. But the reason I'm bringing up Hugh in this moment and kind of being playful is because Hugh's growth is of course going to be 1,000-fold, because he went from a minor supporting character to a major player. In fact, Detmer, Owo, all of these incredible characters that we love so much went from minor to major by virtue of fan love. And so it's almost unfair to compare them. And speaking of unfair to compare things, Kevo, I'm so glad you made the comment you made about Deanna, because something that I can't help but notice is a ship's doctor is, of course, going to transform the most because they see the most life or death situations. So too might a science officer, but somebody like a telepath or an empath is always considered so emotionally together at the beginning that it's hard to make them grow. So somebody like Deanna is set against growth from the beginning, as is the same with my precious Michael Burnham. But somebody like a Stamets, who is designed for growth, or a Hugh, who is designed to be kind of nothing and becomes incredible. That really is the magic of Star Trek. We're so used to seeing these minor characters become such major entities that maybe it's easy to take the Hughes a little for granted. Just a little thought for me, thinking about how handsome Wilson Cruz is all the time.
I really didn't appreciate that. And I think that is also a mark of the streaming era that we live in, where people are able to watch and rewatch and further fall in love with these characters that are sort of minor and don't really get the... I mean, it's not in their contract. That's part of the equation that needs to be acknowledged, is that they are co-star level. And so people, like, I see people in comment sections clamoring for, like, Detmer's Focus episode. That's literally not something that is really done as far as how television production works. Like, if it was done, it would be done in such a way that was like Superstar from Buffy, because Jonathan was a guest star, not someone who is part of the main cast. Like, you're more likely to get that from
Lower Decks.
Yeah, but like, you're more likely to get that from Tig Notaro because she was a main credits regular character. That's built in to the pay rate of a character like that, not someone like the others, and how much focus was able to be given to them, and to show how wide this crew is. And characters like, and I wish I had a picture of him ready more quickly, but like Linus, who was like that would almost be more of a joke on a more classic TNG. It would be more like Morn was a bit of a joke in many ways. And we were able to develop characters and make characters that would be a little more like background jokes into something bigger. And, you know, I think people get frustrated because they feel an ownership of it and they want more and they want what they see and they want to see what they want. And it gets flustering. But, you know, everyone's just doing the best they can with this.
I will also say they maybe set a little bit of a tough precedent because both Ariam and Nan got, if not full spotlight episodes in which they were integral. Granted, Ariam kills her, but it's still, you know, she has this beautiful and like pretty long story. And then Nan actually is in that one, and then the one where she meets her people on the Seed Vault. And so there is kind of this feeling of like, well, everybody's got to get one, right?
Where's their due?
And, you know, Awoshkan and Detmer, I think, really did. And because also, like, Detmer has that moment where she has the PTSD breakdown. So, like, it always felt like they knew that they had some good stuff on their hands. They just didn't get around to the episodes. And then, of course, I imagine they could have happened this season, but for the fact that these actors had to take other jobs. Because again, we don't pay people at this level anything that is livable, just FYI. And so yeah, it is unfortunate, and I think it is the danger that Star Trek runs into, because we get so fangirly about just like random little things that we see in the background. And then the show tries to do us all a favor and be like, oh, you thought that was cute? Okay, we'll pull it in for season 2. And then we get even more obsessed with it. And now they have to like write it its own episode.
Or they do things like this where people really, I don't know if everyone else remembers at the start of this season, but how many articles there were about how will the final season tie into Calypso. People like have always been really into that short trek and were really enamored of it, and I feel like that is part of why they did it. But then for people like us, where we were okay with it being open-ended and we wanted more focus on the present and these characters, we wanted more from that, and so it's a difficult balance.
And I think when you're talking about Star Trek, balance is the name of the game. It's always sought to be futurist and also modernist and also classic. How do you balance something that hopes to be yesterday, today, and tomorrow when it's talking about these things on a personal, mental, and spiritual level? And it's something that comes up a lot where, like, Star Trek looks shitty 10 years later every time. Every fucking time. It looks bad 10 years later. Why? Because the future changes, guys. What we think tomorrow is going to look like changes because of what today is. Because we get to tomorrow a little bit faster every time. And it's because of things like Star Trek. We used to think tablets would only be on Star Trek. And then somebody said, no, I can actually create a tablet. It's going to look like the shit on Star Trek. And like designers of technology openly say Star Trek influenced them. The idea that our future is a future guided by somebody as clever, kind, and loving as Michael Burnham, who knows to separate absolute power from absolute excellence, is what makes her excellent to me. I'm going to miss Disco more than I'll miss most shows. As much as Strange New Worlds is like my jam, because of the ways it's too dramatic and kind of operatic. Burnham is my captain. I will follow her to the edge of the desert, and I will miss her terribly forever. Jonah, how did you feel about your first, more or less, beginning to end Star Trek?
Sad that it's gone. I really enjoyed Star Trek Discovery. I was really having a good old time trying to catch up at the same time, seeing how everything kind of turns out. It's a really lovely show. I wish it just got the love it deserved to have an ending to really send it off, because it felt like it wasn't the ending that they wanted. And you can kind of tell it's a little, in the best and worst way, it's so wish fulfillment that I think it feels like, well, if they were going to have to tack on 30 minutes, just going to go for it and give us everything we want from Michael. And I love that, but I also know for storytelling purposes, it's a little...
It's a little the basic ending of the video game.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's what we expect. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with not defying expectations. But I can't help but wonder and even maybe want, what could have happened. And that's okay.
I want the 100% ending. I'm looking at you, Krakoa. But, Jonah, it has been such a joy to have you on with us for the show. And thank you so much for taking the time to connect with Star Trek the way you have. And of course, we're going to get your sign off in a minute, and I can't wait to. But as somebody who grew up a little boy dreaming about being in Starfleet, getting to share this with you has been a dream come true. And getting to share it with the two of you who came with Star Trek in your blood already. Kebo, your connection was tenuous. But TK, I didn't bring you to Star Trek. I just reminded you that sometimes it was there at best. So how did you guys feel walking away from what might have been the most inventive Star Trek to date?
Me first or you?
In the gimmies.
I, like you said, I sort of came to you with Star Trek in my blood, but it was something that I only knew about tangentially that a lot of guys I thought were cute in middle school were into, and still didn't end up watching it because, again, streaming wasn't a thing, so it was hard to get into. And then finally, I became aware of what a Trekkie you were, and I wanted to embrace it and get to know it better. The thing about nerdery is sometimes you're made to feel like you have to hide it because of the way other people react to it. And this show is definitely a breeding ground for those reactions. And it's flustering to see because you and I have now watched every single episode of TOS, every single episode of TOS's animated series, all of their films. We've watched every 90s show, including Enterprise into the early 2000s. We've watched all of those movies. And now we've watched everything from this era of Star Trek. So we really, really, really are versed and fresh from the last decade. And I cannot for the life of me understand where anyone says this is not Star Trek. If this isn't your favorite, that's fine. Enterprise was certainly not my favorite. It had a lot of post 9/11 weird anti-terrorism flavoring from when the era it was made.
Oh, Dad, why don't you like me?
On top of other flaws where I felt like other characters didn't get focused that I wanted to get focused. Like, there were a lot of things. But I enjoy things about it, and I feel like in so many ways, yes, it was true to the spirit of what Star Trek is in terms of trying to evolve, trying to learn, trying to grow, and trying to help others. And that's all Star Trek Discovery ever was. I know it had a really weird, rough start. I don't disagree with that. I think the thing I most disliked about it was I hated having to read the Klingon subtitles every time because it's not a to listen to in the first place. But I'm a busy man with ADHD and I've got stuff to do. But they were trying to match Game of Thrones. Everything, everything they were doing in the 80s and 90s for Star Trek was trying to match the tone of what sci-fi and fantasy were then too. And it's about moving these things forward. Doctor Who is going through a lot of similar growing pains right now with Russell T Davies taking over and trying a lot of weird and new things this season. Some of them are landing well and some of them aren't. But it reminds me of when he took over the show in 2005 as well and was trying to repilot this thing and trying to push us forward. And that's what Star Trek is really always supposed to be about, is pushing us forward and trying new things. And Discovery really, really, really tried a lot of new things while staying true to the heart of the spirit of exploration and cooperation. And, I'm going to miss that.
TK, here you are at the end of standing at the end of Disco. It's like someone just released "I Will Survive." How do you feel looking back on Discovery?
I love a thing that takes big swings, and they always did, and I think it paid off a ton. I think there were a few really big misses, and that has to be part of the equation when you are taking big swings, but I don't regret investing in this at all. I don't regret that most of my favorite moments were before the last two seasons. I had a lot of fun with it. I had a lot of fun playing around with this turning into Strange New Worlds, and I now have a lot of fun with Strange New Worlds as its own thing. I just thought that this as a sandbox and a playground for how Star Trek could and would need to change to be relevant to a modern audience was an absolute success in being a sandbox. If you asked me, was it a success in being a perfect TV show? Absolutely not. But, in a lot of ways, TNG was not successful at being a perfect TV show, even for its time. So I really... Yes. So yeah, I am very pleased with the time that I spent with the show, and I love the crew so much. And I love Sonequa Martin Green. It's so tough to not say Janeway is my favorite captain. But if anybody makes me want to even question that, it is Burnham.
That's the magic of New Trek. It always gets you to think, maybe I don't change my opinion, but maybe there's room for more opinion in my mind, in my heart. Wow, I am having an emotional reaction to seeing somebody talk about James O'Barr's The Crow in the chat. Hey, Mark, that's pretty cool. Big fan of that era. Really big, super cool time. Anyway, I really agree with you, TK. I feel like I thought that for the rest of my life, Picard would be my favorite captain. And then I met Burnham and Sisko. And, well, Sisko's not a captain. But, and then I met... He's not. And then...
Okay.
So, anyway...
the station doesn't move.
Jake! The station stays in one place, like home plate.
What episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine is that?
Oh my God, I can't. Oh yeah, okay, that's brilliant. So, Jonas, since you just won the episode, where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
You can find me winning the interwebs at Peak Jonah. That's PEAK.
I love that, Kevo. I love that you have taken this journey with me. I am and forever at rest with you here. Sat with you here. So until we fly again, until we engage. Where can everybody find you on the interweb doing amazing, cool stuff about this show?
Well, you can find me on the socials at Kev O'Reilly. That's KEVOREALLY. And this has been a really fun amazing journey. I'm over. I'm looking forward to whatever future Trek is coming our way. We've had a really fun time covering it, and so I'm looking forward to whatever comes next, however quickly it comes next. I know that before that we have some Star Wars coming up next, so that's going to be really cool. We also have some Marvel coming up next, so we're going to have to start figuring out how we want to get amped up for Deadpool and Wolverine. So lots of really cool things, super stoked, and looking forward to covering it with all my bros here. Speaking of bros, speaking of buddies, speaking of pals, TK, where can the folks find you, and what are you excited about? Oh God, what did I do?
TK for a second. I just want to say
go.
TK has given some of the best comic opinions he has ever given on X's for Podcast over in the new format, bringing new ideas to things, bringing new content out there. Absolutely killing it. So I just want to say, if you want to check out more TK, don't forget to check him out over on X's for Podcast, our audio sister show, where we cover things like comics and more.
Yes, I am there. Find me there. I can be found on the internet at TK Elemental. I am really looking forward to Section 31. I'm really just looking forward to seeing Michelle Yeoh again. I'm also super stoked about another season of Strange New Worlds. I imagine things will be very different for all Star Trek shows now, given what happened with this one. And so it'll be Strange New Worlds is especially the one where I think we will see the reflection of that most clearly. And I think that'll be interesting. So can't wait. Nico, Jonah, take it away.
Well, I think if you want to check me out and check out my music, you can check it out over at Nico Action. That's NicoActionMusic. So that's me at the first part, and add music for my music, including things like my jazzy cover of the Star Trek theme. We've got a TOS theme in there. We've got, Lower Decks, trying to really put together a space jukebox. But other than that, if you guys want to check out some of the other incredible stuff about this show, you can check it out at X's for Show. Check out our podcast at X's for Podcast, as well as the HTML podcast, all of which is linked. And don't forget to check us out next weekend, where you can check us talking Drag Race and more. But until then, 3 things we'd love it if you guys could do for us: like, comment, and subscribe. That's 3 things that everybody asks for, but they're really cool things, so you guys want to do them. Be like everybody. But then 3 things. Oh, and Mark, you were incredible tonight too. Thank you so much for your incredible energy. Cyborg said thanks. You guys were amazing tonight. We're as incredible as our audience and our subject matter, and tonight it was incredible. But the 3 things we could really use you guys to do for you. Now, that's number 1, stay safe. It's a spooky world, and we'd love to see you next broadcast. Number 2, that is be brave, just like Starfleet. You need to make sure that you are always going boldly. But number 3, that's evolve daily, because who you were yesterday, amazing. Who you were today, incredible. But who you are tomorrow, that's the dream. And until then, we can't wait to discover who you'll be then. I almost said disco. We can't wait to discover who you'll be then. Thanks for joining us for our disco weekend. We'll see you.